Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Ephrata Community Church weekly podcast, a conversation with our pastors and leaders meant to continue encouraging you to know God, know freedom, know purpose, and make a difference.
Hey Ephrata Community Church, great to be with you this week. I have the privilege of being here with David Burr, who's our missions director over something we call Mission Connect. More on that in a little bit. But I just want to say, David, it's great to have you, man.
Thank you for
How many
having me.
years have you been with Ephrata Community Church now?
Just over 2 years, a year and a bit full-time, a little bit part-time before that.
It was fun to hear that in your story. And by the way, if you didn't get a chance to hear David's story, it was interweaved with some stuff that Kevin and he did this past weekend. He talked about when he moved to the area. It was a deeply difficult season of his life, and he just simply typed in house of prayer because you needed someplace to go and pray in a focused environment, and he just types in house of prayer and Lidditz because it was the town he's living in, and Gateway House of Prayer popped up
at the top of the list there.
So thrilled for those of us who have found our way in through some of our partner groups, HarvestNet, which we'll talk about in a bit, and then also Gateway. But we're thrilled to have you on as part of the team. But we want to talk a little bit about your story that brought you here, and in it you did something unique. Many times if we're doing a message around mission, someone talks about their calling and tries to inspire us through God's heart for a particular people group or region of the world. You took a different route, and part of our God Is series, you showed to talk about God is friend, whereas Kevin chose provider, Dan, the God who sees me, Matt, the God who is a good father, and you said the God who's friend. What an interesting way to approach a missions message. What made you want to do it?
Well, if you were able to hear a bit of the story, we had an unexpected departure out of missions, which was my whole adult life had been in missions, 20 plus years, and we had an unexpected departure in 2018. And it's been an amazing few years here. Part of this last year, having a therapy journey, being able to talk to a counselor and process that
about the disappointments,
the difficult exit. And just some reframes God did. I found that, not that it's terribly wrong, but there were some unhealthy patterns that just crept in where I was doing missions out of a sense of being a worker or obligation, or trying to just do what God wants me to do what God wants me to do. And I had lost part of the working with God and working on His harvest field. He's the one that's on mission. We're joining Him, and He delights in working with us. And God just corrected and realigned me to doing this in partnership with Him. And so it's a little bit of a different take on a missions message. A lot of them are inspiring about the nations and the lost and the unreached. And I didn't want to eliminate that, but also just bring in a foundation again of that we're partnering with God.
Well, I think that's one of the things that stood out to me in your message, and I think so many people identified. I had the privilege of being service pastor this weekend, and that's someone who then gets to get a sense of what are some of the words that the Lord might be releasing into the community. And then also I was part of prayer ministry teams at the end. And we were able to feel like the Lord was wanting to minister to that whole thing of number one, when He makes sure that we are more than just our callings or our assignments, I think is the word you use. He makes sure that our identity is nailed down. And I noticed something in your story, and I know a little bit about your life. It wasn't like everything in your life was off. You were enjoying. I mean, even though it was a difficult field to be working in there in French Polynesia, you were enjoying it. I mean, like you said, you had spent 15 to 18 years prepping for it. Then all of a sudden, it feels like, quote, God shuts it down. And one of the things that you could say as an outcome of all this was that God was trying to remind you that you were friend even before you were that. And a little bit more on that, like when you sense like, hey, God's slowing this down because He wants me to remind me of self about that. He's also multitasking and doing so many other things at the same time. It took you a while to figure that out, though, that He was trying to not just get at your sense of purpose or mission, but your actual identity. And you made it a big point yesterday.
While I was going through some of this therapy journey, I found a book in the office. Someone put, a pastor in the Baltimore, D.C. area, and he didn't use that formula I put in the message notes this weekend, purpose plus assignment equals calling, but he talked about purpose and assignment aligning. And I just had, through the Holy Spirit, a revelation that what I was calling, my calling, was my assignment. And there's more to our calling than just a season of time where God has us doing a specific thing.
Sure.
We have a purpose to be a witness for Christ everywhere we are, and we're partnering with God in whatever He's doing. And we'll have different assignments along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And just a realignment of, I had made assignment the whole rather than a part of the equation.
And I don't think you're the only one that does that. I think because assignment is always oftentimes linked to the job we're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We forget that it's first linked to our vocation, which is voice, right?
Yeah.
In other words, who we are, then how it's used in the world. It's really easy. Like I think of a lot of, let's just say, stay-at-home moms. Of course, their assignment is so linked to who they are. Or let's just say a Lancaster County business owner. I think of Floyd Zook, who starts Zook Interiors. He knows what his assignment is. But even as we back up from that, we still have callings and purposes that are bigger than assignments. I think of myself, I'm at that stage where I finally figured out, hey, I am a bridge that brings people into deeper understandings. And I've noticed something. If you look at my jobs for the last 25 years, they all were part of me being bridged that brought something into a deeper understanding. However, the assignment shifted during that whole time. And that's not an easy thing always for people to wrap their head around, that, hey, hold your assignments loosely. But know who you are in this calling.
And I thought that assignment was going to be lifelong. Like we moved there indefinitely, and things
And it
just
makes
changed.
sense, because if you think about it, you're trying to penetrate a people group that's not your first language, not your first, feels like your assignment is completely wrapped into your life. I think of like a single stay-at-home parent too, right? Or a stay-at-home parent, or even a single mom or something like that. It is your whole life, but how important it is to still understand your identity outside of the immediacy of what's going on in that. I just deeply appreciate it. And did you hear much back? Like, what was some of the stuff you heard back from people?
Oh, well, I heard a lot of people saying I'm in a similar season or walking out of a similar season, really trying to identify purpose or assignment, or people that, things just really changed on me. Heard from a group of people saying, I'm also not from this place, but God has called me here and not sure why. And starting to see more and more of that. God is bringing different people to this county. So met some people who, I married someone from this area, but I'm not from here.
Right.
And a lot of people just thanked me. I was really encouraged by so much feedback that, I've been there, or I'm in the thick of that as well.
No, I love it when we get a chance to share, and it identifies and connects with so many people. Yours, it felt like God was saying to you, like, hey, David, you've fixated a little bit on the assignment, and He decided to minister the idea of friend to you, like you were my friend. Whereas he could take so many angles with so many people. What about that seemed to connect so deeply with you? Like, you are friend.
I had a hard time picking one, because my testimony has God healing me, God revealing Himself as a father, and so many facets of God woven in there. It was the question I felt the Lord really asked me, what do you want to do? It was that just threw
I love
me.
how you said it. It just blew your brain.
My computer crashed. I had just, okay, God, what do you want me to do? What's the next marching order almost? What is the next word? What's the next word? And just really, I'm working for you. I'm working for you. And when God said, well, what do you want to do? Like, let's work together. And just hey, I want to give you a voice, and I want to hear what matters to you matters to me.
Right.
And it was such a, hey, I'm coming down. I don't like to use the word on your level, but I'm coming down to be with you and work with you, rather than just me doing my tasks.
Right.
And it was hard. I didn't have a frame of reference for it at first. It was really, really powerful.
We spend some time in this community talking about the fact that our God is active and our God speaks, right? And I've learned something that I didn't come from a background that thought that. I thought that the ways of God as declared in His Bible had been spoken. There wasn't necessarily some newer rhema word. I had a written logos word. So it was when I first started encountering the idea that God speaks, and there's a way to learn how to hear the voice of God. I tend to find that when you're in the early stages of learning how to hear the voice of God, it is very much Him being, I don't want to say directive, but prescriptive. Meaning He does say some things and wants you to act on them, because it's building trust and faith that when He speaks, He backs it up, right? So one of the things I was reflecting on with your story is, it doesn't surprise me that in some ways you wanted to hear the word of the Lord.
Yeah.
Because often when we're first learning how to hear the voice of God, it does come as this definitive thing where he's asking you, just trust me, take a step, do this. But what I loved about your story was it reached the point where the Lord's like, well, David, you've been faithful in that. Now I want to teach you that I'm not just a king, I'm a father, right? And you're not just a servant, you're a friend.
Yeah.
And it's not like there isn't language for servant. I mean, Paul calls himself, I'm a bondservant unto God, right? So it's not like there's not a season in our life where understanding ourselves as servants or God as king isn't legitimate. And you even highlighted that. But it is a powerful thing when the Lord says, hey, you know what? There's some things I want to start journeying in together with. And that's uncomfortable at first. Some of us would rather be servants and have a king.
Yeah, and when you are in the nations, the needs of the lost are so big. And you feel just, I have to give of myself so much because there's so many who don't know Jesus and there's so much need. And God was like, well, hey, what's on your heart to do? Let's work together.
And I love the image you had. And first of all, I just love the way you referenced going to therapy and being able to get some clinical help. Believe me, around here at Ephrata Community Church, we believe in you have a relationship with the Lord and the Lord ministers to you. We have connect groups where we go and we have a community that ministers. We have pastoral support that's a form. And then we have even clinical levels. And you chose, hey, this was a season where I think I need to step into some clinical level of care. And one of our counselors at Thrive Counseling was able to lead you through some exercises in the Lord where the Lord was welcomed by you to show you what the Lord was thinking when all of this was going on. And I love your image of the jars where these individual things that you had done for the Lord, like the way you honored previously spoken words, you had cared for them so well. You thought you knew how to carry them. And then it's just how you dropped them in front of Jesus. Jesus helps clean them up, takes them to the Father, says, look what our son's done.
Yeah, a lot of people appreciated the jars.
It's a great picture, man, because every one of those jars is a legitimate moment you had with the Lord where you did hear and you did encounter him. You were trying to figure out what that looked like, and you face the facts. There are seasons where, our God is bigger than our understanding at moments, what he's doing in seasons. Talk a little bit about the 3 years, stock and shelves. I think that was just such a great visual image because many of us have had our moments where we were sidelined in what the trajectory we thought we were on. Difficult season.
Yeah, we left the mission field unexpectedly and landed here, and our in-laws took us in for a few months, and then we got our own place, and I needed to find a job, so I just found something, right away. And I felt the Lord said, walk through the door that I've opened and just wait. And so I thought it would be maybe 12 months or so of that, but it ended up being 3 years where I was just being faithful to what I knew was in front of me and just crying out to God. And he was saying, I'm not answering those questions right now, just trust me. And it was very difficult, but I can see, we can all be in seasons of our lives. We look over our shoulder and see the wisdom of God. There was something that he did within me, and my relationship with him grew in a way. But it was difficult.
Yeah, it is. And I want to point out something that I believe took place during the weekend as well, where oftentimes our weekends are not just simply what's happening in the preaching of the word, but it also involves worship. It involves the gifts, spiritual gifts at work in our midst. And I think there was something the Lord was ministering over the weekends around stillness and trust as well. One of the pre-service prophetic words that came to us was, be still and know that I'm God. And then also the whole idea of like, I will deliver you, yours is only to be still. And when you think about those 3 years that you walked through, and you joked about the words, you kept going like, hey, I'm proud of you, just trust me. Just don't thrash, hey, and then you get another one. Hey, I just want you to know, I respect you. I'm so proud of you. Just stay still.
God's asking me to trust him.
I just want to make sure that we know, like, that was clearly something that was a theme this weekend. And I hope that some people were able to grab that activation and bring in that impartation that was in the room to be able to sit a little longer with confusion and those moments. And so I'm so proud of you, David, that you sat for those 3 years. And they're difficult, aren't they?
Yeah, and in missions, it's really easy to talk about, sleeping in uncomfortable places and bugs and the food and all the comforts we sacrifice. But one of the biggest things we can sacrifice is our right to understand and our right to know what's going on. And the Lord was just, I know you don't know, but do you trust my character enough to sit there in the unknown?
That's right.
And just be with me.
That's right. And it honors God. I oftentimes say that when we're able to be still and trust in the midst of ambiguity or anxiety, it is a form of worship to God.
Yeah.
Because so many of us need constant stimulation to make sense of ourselves, but when we can sit and trust, it's the story of Job. It's the story of so many of the biblical greats who waited years between when the Lord spoke and when the Lord fulfilled. It's a deep act of worship to God when we're able to give him that level of trust. So kudos to you. Great weekend. Glad it was wonderful. I want to spend a little time here at the end chatting about Mission Connect, just so you all know that at Ephrata Community Church, we give about 20% of our income to mission outside of our church, meaning these are partners locally, regionally, or internationally that we've decided and put through a process that David has the stewardship and the calling here to oversee. And we just love being generous. So we have partners all over the place, and we're thrilled to have them and for them to be a part of us. Many of them we hear this weekend. Name a few. Did you hear any stories coming out of it?
Yeah, we have several in the region, and we have several international, some of whom where they're sending church, others we've just met along the way and partnered with them. But locally, we have a lot of youth ministries, Crossfire, On Fire, TNT, YWAM. Ephrata Area Social Services is another one. We have a group of people at our church partnering with Ephrata Area Social Services to try and reach the needs in Ephrata. Align Life Ministries, She's Somebody's Daughter, In Faith and Emerge, and Church World Service. A lot of our local in the region, and then we have our missionaries that we've sent and some other international partners overseas.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hey, so two things I want to constantly be educating so that you understand how, when you pull back the curtain on how we've structured things at Ephrata Community Church, two things that David has the privilege of overseeing something that we call our purpose groups. You oftentimes hear us talk about connect groups. Well, within the connect groups, we have people groups, we have passion groups. Passion groups might be, I like to ride motorcycles.
Yeah,
we love to crochet, and you're rallying around an affinity like that, something you all love. And then there's the last one called purpose groups. And so at our community right now, we oftentimes have people come up to us as pastors and say like, "Hey, do we do enough for foster care? Or can we do something with prison ministry, or or can we evangelize?" So what you'll hear from us, particularly David, is sure, but guess how we're going to do that? We're going to encourage you to begin a purpose group. And start to rally people to that purpose. And if we notice that the Spirit's breathing life on it and that group is engaging, then we begin to consider whether or not it's time to step into some level of partnership through that group with regional people who might do something. So whether or not you have a heart for crisis, pregnancy, fostering, prison ministry,
anything and everything.
General welfare of the disenfranchised in our communities, we want to be able to help you make a difference in that area. It's not just something where you come and say to us, like, we need to start a ministry as. You're going to quickly ask and go, hey, you're the ministry we're sowing into. You're the individual that we're encouraging. Go ahead and start a purpose group. And David ends up helping coach those purpose groups. We have one right now that does evangelism in this region. We have another that cares for supporting foster network. And those groups could go on and on, but we'll give you a hint. We're not building them. We're trying to sow into those of you who feel callings in this area. So that's one thing you do.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's really wonderful. The other thing is HarvestNet. Why don't you share a little bit, like help put on the radar who HarvestNet is that we oftentimes hear around here.
Yeah, HarvestNet International was founded by our founding pastor, Barry Whistler. So about 8 or 9 years ago, I believe, Barry handed off Ephrata Community Church to Pastor Kevin Eschelman. And then it was kind of the elders laid their hands on Kevin as senior pastor, and then the elders turned around and laid hands on Barry and really blessed him to start HarvestNet International. So that is a network of individuals, churches, and businesses who partner together for global harvest. And so he has summits in India, in Europe, just recently in Africa, and then every November here, an international summit of all these people who want to partner together for global harvest. And HarvestNet sort of acts as an apostolic network and covering for them.
That's right. And once a month they hold something called a net call, which has a bunch of international leaders in their different regions. And then is it once every 3 months? I might have to turn to some of the other wisdom in the room where they do a net day in person, right? And this Wednesday, there's one coming up where where HarvestNet brings in an expert around a particular area, whether it's burnout in ministry or something, and we have a morning together. It's hosted here at Effort Community Church, although it's HarvestNet International that's actually operating it. And we just want to encourage whether you're a business, whether you're part of a nonprofit, maybe on the board of a nonprofit, looking into joining that HarvestNet network and getting the encouragement. Maybe there's a small nonprofit you're a part of. You might want to encourage them. You might want to get involved in this network because it's as much about coaching and support as it is anything else. So we highly appreciate the leadership development stuff that takes place internationally and even locally around HarvestNet International. So you might hear that phrase a lot around here. It's because they are probably our most strategic partner we've chosen to join with, and we want to encourage that. So David, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Deeply appreciated what you delivered this weekend and how the Spirit was using it in our community.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
and hey, we wish you all the best. There's one last thing I want to push. If you're interested in hearing more about what we believe is God on Mission, we have an Introduction to Missions course. It's a growth group that's kicking off this Thursday night. David's directing it. Like I might have said over the weekend in some of the services, it's bigger than you might think. It's partly about even hearing God, joining God in mission, knowing what we're up to. We want to highly encourage you if you haven't signed up for one. David, how many weeks is it?
It's going to be 6 weeks. First week this week, but even if you miss that, you can join in on the second week and just see what God has done around the world in history and what's still happening today.
That's right. So it's going to be a great snapshot of historical and current, a lot of fun stuff. Go to our website, go to growth groups, and you'll be able to register right up to the start of class Thursday night. And again, even if you can't make week 1, we encourage you. 5 out of 6 ain't bad. So you jump in and do it. Say, hey, we appreciate you. You have a great week.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks again for joining us today. We hope that you've been encouraged by listening. You can listen to previous episodes, find additional resources, and of course, learn more about us at effortacommunitychurch.com.